Gore Vidal was an icon of American literature and of political debate. He died at age 86 in 2012. He was known for his razor-sharp wit and observations, as well as his elegant writing. Equally famous were his ego and irascibility. He was a frequent guest on this program.
What would you do different in the life that you have lived?
I can't think of anything. I have done pretty much what I wanted to do. I'll give a little advice out there for those who worry about their place in the world. Always remember that it is of no consequence to you what other people think of you. What matters is what you think of them. That is how you live your life.
Michael Mewshaw was a young writer at the beginning of his career when he met Gore Vidal. He has written a book about their relationship. It is called Sympathy for the Devil, 4 decades of friendship with Gore Vidal. Edmund White said it is the sort of focused, sober study Vidal himself never would have had the modesty or patience to write. I'm pleased to have Michael Mewshaw at this table. Welcome.
Thank you.
How did you meet?
A mutual friend gave me his phone number in Rome, and this was 1975. I was going there to spend the year at the American Academy with my wife and my then infant son, and I called him, and I thought it was a sort of roll of the dice, but I said that I was there and spend the year there, and he just said, come down and have a drink, and which I think certainly is not like the character one thinks of as being standoffish and patrician, remote, detached. He just said, come to have a drink, and Lynn and I went down and had a drink, and we hit it off. And
so it became instant friends.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to suggest that he was an easy guy, because he could be a very prickly person, and he was cool. I mean, he held himself aloof, but he liked to talk, and he loved to talk, and he was capable of listening, and he was also capable of enormous generosity and hospitality. And as I've often pointed out to people, I don't like my chances if I had wound up in London calling, I don't know, Kingsley Amis or someone like that, and I don't think they would have said, come right over and have a drink. Or if I had called Norman Mailer, just, I'm in Brooklyn, I'd like to see you.
How did this friendship with Gore evolve?
You know, Rome was a small city, really, especially the expat community. There were any number of writers and artists and filmmakers who lived there, and frequently they got together at Gore's place or at somebody else's place, or you'd see people in a trattoria. And it wasn't days after I first met him that I bumped into him at some other function, some other restaurant, and our paths continued to cross. And then he found out that I was reviewing Tennessee Williams' memoirs, and he asked me to pass along the galleys when I was finished, because he wanted to review it too. And in those days, you know, it was before instant communication and internet, and the mail service was dreadful in Rome. So I had a galley, and I reviewed it and passed it on to him, and he reviewed it. And
well, did he have somebody wanting him to review it, or did he simply want to do it himself and then found, obviously, an able publisher?
I think he could have sort of picked his spot, but he reviewed it for the New York Review of Books. Right. And I remember thinking...
Good spot to pick for that.
Yeah, great spot. And I remember thinking that, gee, this is a little dicey. Gore knew Tennessee very well. I thought you were supposed to absent yourself when you knew the author or had some association with him that might give you a conflict of interest. And I thought, well, this is going to be a sort of Valentine to Tennessee, but it wasn't. It was a very frank and forthright and extremely interesting and intelligently written essay about Tennessee's career, what he did and did so well, but also why he failed to deal with alcoholism and success. And crucially, at that point, Gore had just turned 50. He was still going to the gym. He was still a very fit guy. And he, the very first night I met him, talked about alcoholism being the plague of American literature. And he named any number of writers whose work he felt was affected negatively by alcohol. And he felt it was a terrible deleterious effect on Tennessee, but on a lot of other people too. John Horn Burns, and he kept...
How about Hemingway?
Hemingway, Faulkner. He talked forever about their alcoholism. James Jones, Irwin Shaw. I mean, he had a whole litany of writers he felt had been ruined by alcohol. And at that time, he didn't drink hard liquor. He was, as I say, he was 50. But within a couple of years, to my surprise, he began drinking scotch and vodka. And by the time he was in his mid-50s, I remember at the age of...
Lost his fitness.
Not just lost his fitness, but also he suffered what I think was a very significant experience. He went into a period of depression which effectively lasted the rest of his life. At the age of 57, he told my wife that he wanted to commit suicide. And I think this is a whole part of Vidal, and people are familiar with the fact that late in his life he was wobbly and drinking too much and apt to say things that were inappropriate. But this had been coming on for a long time, and it put me in mind of a quote that Mailer made when Hemingway committed suicide. And many people felt that Hemingway had betrayed his entire body of work, and he was somebody who had so many years and decades been seen as a man of great courage and determination. You would have thought he would have gutted through this. And Hemingway said, rather than joining the sort of chorus of obloquy about Hemingway's suicide, he said,
Who said
Mailer. Mailer said this about Hemingway, that it revealed the level of anxiety and suicidal ideation that he must have been living with for years and years, that it's a tragedy that it happened, but in retrospect, it's heroic that he was able to overcome it long enough, that his nights must have been nightmarish, and that any smaller man probably would not have held up as well. I think of Vidal in the same way. I think the fact that he continued to be productive, he continued to write and write well, was a tribute to his will and his incredible inner strength. I don't see the fact that I write about this as in any way, revealing something unflattering about Gore. I feel that it's an important.
Have you had some criticism on that level? So therefore you seem to be anxious to.
Yeah, there has been some criticism. There have been people who said, well, we all get old and we all deteriorate. But I'd like to make it clear that I'm talking about Gore when he was in his 50s and 60s, and still.
So why do you think he changed?
I think he was a very conflicted and ultimately unhappy man.
Conflicted about?
Well, I think you knew him. You've dealt with him on air.
Right.
There's never been a more self-possessed performer than Gore Vidal.
And he turned out to be a really good actor, too.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. People forget that he not only wrote for the movies, he acted in movies. He not only wrote for the stage, but he was a wonderful actor himself. And he was the narrator of so many documentaries and so many, the subject of them, a wonderful interview. And he actually jokingly said that his memoir was going to be called An Actor Prepares. Instead, he called it palimpsest, as he said, a word that no one will know about a life that no one will know after they read it. He was a great performer. I think the conflict was in that kind of parallax between his image and the reality of the man.